Hey y'all, welcome to Marcy in the Middle, a podcast about transitions and the middle of life. Here we talk about everything from relationships to finding your place in the world and lots more. We'll talk with friends from all walks of life and find out what they've learned along the way. So whether you feel young or old or somewhere in between, this is the place for you. Welcome to the Middle. Today's guest is Janelle Batts, co-founder of Red River TV, a conservative blog and video content hosted by Janelle and her husband Kevin. Janelle also has a blog, The Story of Nell 1986, which is a devotional and prophetic journal. Janelle resides in Oklahoma with her husband and their 3 children. Now let's get started. Well, welcome to the podcast, Janelle.
Thank you.
Thanks for driving down and visiting your old stomping ground.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have known you from a distance because I'm older than you, but you grew up in Atoka.
Yeah.
I love your mom and dad.
Yes.
And then you've kind of moved on and had an exciting career and kind of not necessarily the typical career of somebody from our area.
Yeah.
So I was just gonna, I guess, have you just give us a little bit of your background and tell us part of your story, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on.
Yeah.
I just want to say, I know I've said this to you, just before, but I really believe that this platform that you're building is going to be really unique. And I feel like, Marcy, that you have been a part of the community for a long time, but it's like now a new space is being created for the community. So I'm excited to hear all the stories that are going to come out of here. And so just a huge congratulations on that. But it's been like fun actually coming back. I was driving through town and I was like trying to remember what was where. It's been a long time for me. I think I've been here probably maybe a total of 2 to 3 times in 17 years.
And so not very many.
Not very many at all. And I'm like trying to remember when those times were. I just know what was happening at the time. But anyways, grew up here. Like you said, my mom and dad, amazing people. And then pretty much, I think it's interesting being though back in, in this area because it so shaped, my future and who I am today.
Yes.
And so many people here. In this community that just, loved my family, loved us as kids. All of the, different parts of my life, people were there. And when there was the troubled time and when there was the good time and when there was the really key times in my life, I feel like that it was this community that was really there, that helped me move into that. So you can kind of lose a little bit of a, sense of that whenever you move. I am a firm believer that you absolutely should never forget where you come from.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's incredibly, it's key in your life to always be able to look back and see how far you've come. But also it's those moments when you struggled. It's those moments when you had your community. It's those moments where you can link back to those people that I think helps you to be able to look forward in your life, just in my personal opinion. And I think it pertains also, though, to your faith. It pertains to all the places of your life, not just where you grew up, but it pertains to remembering a time where you were in desperate need of people. You were in desperate need of Jesus. You were in desperate need of relationships that cultivated the love of God in your life that helped you to get where you are right now. Because when we forget, we have a tendency to feel like that we don't need those people or we don't need those things any longer, that we may not need God as much as we did. I can attest to needing Jesus every single day.
Same, and still, and always.
And always.
Yep.
So, but I think that it's kind of cool coming back here today and being able to talk with you because, it's like all those memories come up and where you lived and the people that you knew and all those things. So, yeah,
That's
it's
exciting.
been really cool.
Well, I appreciate it. I know just kind of my heart behind the podcast is to let a lot of different people share their stories and a lot of different ages. Excuse me. And just, we're all the same, I feel like.
Yeah.
And the older you get, the more you realize that. Like, I'm 51 and I still in my head feel just like I did when I was in high school.
Yeah.
And I have I'm spending a lot more money on skincare and Botox than I was back then. But you truly do, the core of who you are, I feel like stays that way. And I know from my parents' friends and my own friends that are older than me, they still think that. So, but we all face a lot of similar probably feelings.
Yeah.
Even though your life might be different, your circumstances may be different. I feel like the human experience is obviously meant to be lived together, and community is a powerful, powerful thing that in these last few years we've realized how important it is, but we still are probably more connected digitally than face to face.
Yeah.
And you just, I need the human interaction.
Yeah.
And people are what does make a difference in your life. And it is the Lord working, but he works through his people.
Exactly.
And we're the ones with skin on down here. So, okay, so you grew up. Tell me, because I'm enough older than you that I remember you as a young lady, but I don't remember, like, we weren't in school together.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we weren't in school together. So, tell me kind of, you referenced some tricky, difficult moments. When was, that may not have been in high school. That may have been college or.
Well, what was interesting is that I feel like a lot of the troubling part that started for me, it was actually, it was well hidden for a long time for me. A lot of people didn't see that there was anything wrong. Mm-hmm. And to be honest, I hid a lot of it, even from my own family, like my own parents. And, the enemy will make sure that we do that right, that we're unseen and can't get the help, that we need. But I think, really, I think the crux for me was probably by the time I was about 17 years old. I was experiencing a huge identity crisis.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that's what it was at the time. You just know that something horrible is happening in your life and you don't really know what it is. You're angry, but you don't know why. Mm-hmm. You feel very disillusioned, very disoriented. You don't really know where you belong, just that whole thing. And some people, would just say, well, that's just you coming into adulthood. Well, that's just you hitting that, that age. Mm-hmm. And part of it probably was that, because that's a very real time for people that, are 18, 19 years old. They're coming out of high school. They're having to figure out who they are. But I think for me, it was a little bit deeper than that. I think I just struggled with a place where I was trying to figure out where I belonged and didn't really know. But unfortunately, that began to produce really, I would say, what's the word? Really self-destructive behavior. Yeah. And that's kind of where it ended for me. By that time, I was in high school. I was already, starting to drink alcohol. I was already starting to do things that, my parents obviously didn't teach me to do. And so, but by the time it was probably about, I don't know, it's like 17. I graduated when I was 17. But maybe by the time I was 18, it was just like I was dealing with deep depression, was dealing with suicide. Mm-hmm. I really did not know which direction that I was supposed to go. And I was getting high at that point, and it was kind of, interesting for my family because, it wasn't like my siblings didn't go through all of their issues or their stuff just like every young person has to. But for me, everyone was looking at me like, what is wrong with you? You know what I mean? It was like my siblings were like, oh, okay, like obviously I always kind of felt like the black sheep of the family, you know what I mean? Because I was like the wild one or whatever. And so, but unfortunately, I just wasn't dealing with the issues very well, and I wasn't dealing with them effectively at all. And so I would consider that time to be a dark time in my life. And really, a lot of the help even that, that I received then, mind you, I had the community. I had great people, in my life at the time that were there for me. But I was really, I was angry, and I didn't really want help. To be honest. And sometimes that can be a really bad place, and sometimes it can be a really good place.
Usually gets you to a good place, but we all have, you gotta realize the shape you're in before you can know to get help.
Exactly. Or else it's just like someone forcing you to do it, right?
Sure.
And so, I ended up at that time, and I won't go into all of the reasons, why I ended up there, but I ended up moving. I had moved out of my parents' house at the time, and again, just really self-destructive behavior. It got to a point in my life where, people kind of thought it was like, oh, it's just like a party thing, just sowing her wild oats. It wasn't that way for me. You could ask my sister, because she was there and kind of witnessed it all, but like I wasn't like partying per se. I was getting drunk, and I was staying drunk like while I was driving and while I was at work, and like, you know what I mean? Like filling water bottles up with vodka kind of a thing. So I knew that it was like I had no control. I thought I had control, but I didn't. And was just in a really bad way as far as that. I hid a lot of that, from my parents. I hid a lot of that from people. You know how you do. You're doing things that's wrong. You try to hide from the people that are going to look at you and tell you to quit it.
That's right. Exactly.
And that's what I was doing, essentially. But a lot of people loved me through that, including my parents.
Yes.
They loved me through that. And that will be one of the biggest places in my life that I think spoke the most to me about people that were a part of my life at the time, was that they all loved me through it. And you need that. And mind you, I do believe in putting up healthy boundaries when someone's dealing with addiction, because they can. People that deal with addiction can literally just suck the life out of you. I mean, just literally. And you do have to put those boundaries up. But people loved me where they were and where I was at the time. And so that pretty much, led to me moving back in, with my parents, because it was like, hey, get help, or we're going to get help for you. And I was like, oh, I know what that means. So I just played the role and was like, yay, I'm going to stop everything and I'm going to move back in, which I did. I stopped doing everything cold turkey and moved back in with my parents, and it was good for a time. And then it was like my mental state started going downhill. My health started going downhill. It was a mess. But I started to do probably like the first, I would say, any real healing took place then. And then I ended up getting married.
Okay.
Which was great.
That's right.
Yeah, and it was kind of interesting, that story, because I met my husband, Kevin, here in Atoka, and I grew up here. He didn't really grow up here like that, and so it ended up being a situation where it was kind of funny. We joke about it now, but my parents thought at the time that he was like this really horrible influence in my life because of everything that I was doing. And come to find out, like, he wasn't a bad influence at all. Like, he was looking at me like, hey, get your crap together, kind of a thing. And God actually told me to break up with him. And that was very confusing and painful for me.
Okay.
And I remember being like, why? This is like one of the best things in my life, at this point. And but I knew I had to do what God asked me to do. Now, mind you, I didn't know that God was going to turn around and give me that relationship back.
Right.
But I knew that it was a place of him just wanting to know if I was going to actually do what he asked me to, what he asked me to do. And he ended up going on a deployment. He was gone for a whole year. We didn't speak for a whole year, and that was really hard. But what was crazy is that when he came back, before he came back, God had already told me that he was going to be my husband, and I had to have that very, ironic conversation with God of, okay. I was like, why would you ask me to, break up with this person if you knew that, he was the person I was going to marry?
Right.
And I will never forget, God saying, I had to test you to see if you would give something up that was important to you. And once you did that, I was able to turn around and bless you with that.
Okay.
And so that was always really special to me.
Yeah.
I always felt like it was kind of between me and God, but also between my husband and I,
yeah.
To be able to look back at that.
Yeah. A lot. Often people will say, God told me. Because I feel like we all hear God speak differently. Was that an audible voice, or how did you perceive that that's what?
It was a dream.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you had a dream?
Yeah. It was a very distinct dream.
Okay.
And I remember at first I was like, it was one of those things where after I had the dream, I had like a very strong knowing for weeks.
Okay.
And it was like, I just couldn't get past it. Yeah.
Undo it.
And I remember I contacted at the time, there were 2 people in my life at that time that were just so key. in my life. They were really just pouring into me at the time,
Yes.
and ended up sharing the dream with them.
Okay.
And both of them, very strong Christians, and they were able to speak into that dream and speak into my life. And so it was nice to have that and to have that confirmation, because I thought, well, this could be totally wrong. You know what I mean?
Right.
But there were other things that began to happen after that that was huge confirmation, for us.
Yeah, you knew and you
Yeah.
recognized.
Yeah.
During the year while he is gone, are you like, what is the condition? Are you still battling addiction and depression during this time?
Yeah, I was at the time. Now, mind you, I wasn't really dealing with the addiction, because it was more of I'm going to stop doing this so that you do not try to send me somewhere or
Right.
whatever.
Yes.
That part, stopped because of that.
Yes.
But really the mental state and all of that, it was difficult.
Yeah.
I admit. I was still going through it
Sure.
during that time. And my parents were, incredibly supportive. My whole family was, and they were trying to help me, as best I could. Sometimes I wonder back then, if it was a good idea to just stop doing everything cold turkey, because it can affect your mind and,
Sure.
different things.
Sure.
So I struggled through that part. But I would have to say I was in a better place than where I was before. But I think I would like to stress that it is so important that you do come to that place finally where you're doing the change for yourself, and that you actually want that change. Because when you don't, you're just going to, everyone knows with addiction that the likelihood of you relapsing is, pretty high, especially if you're not, dealing with the root issues.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened to me.
Yeah.
I got married and we moved, and, things were great. We began to form, not form, I actually ended up meeting what we call our Army family
Okay.
in Fort Hood, Texas. And he was already, my husband was already stationed there. So I ended up, moving away, from my
Yes.
family
Yes,
and
you
everybody,
left.
and went and was living in, basically central Texas. And it was a different time, but it was a fun time, getting to meet new people and forming all those relationships. Our marriage really struggled for
Well, it's hard.
a while. The first year I was like, oh, I've made a terrible mistake. I have made a terrible mistake. This was not God after all. Yeah. And it was like, the first year was just awful. And I remember he actually deployed the day of our anniversary, our 1 year anniversary.
Okay.
You're like, oh, this is wonderful. We're having such a great time. Marriage is so from God. Like I had such a horrible attitude. I was like, this is not what I thought it was going to be.
Really?
And that deployment ended up being a very pivotal time for our marriage, because it was, I think 2008 was pretty much one of the worst years of our lives, both of us.
Did you get married in 2007?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it ended up being a year. I ended up relapsing that year.
Okay.
And mind you,
And this is while you're living away from your family. You're on base or in military housing.
Yes. I ended up moving to Oklahoma City while he was deployed, because he felt better about me being closer to my family.
Sure.
My family felt better about it, and so I was like, I don't mind doing that for the year that he was going to be gone. It actually ended up being closer to like 15 months. And so it was really, really difficult, because we thought people were joking, but they always say that, well, when they deploy, everything just kind of like happens, that you wouldn't expect to happen. That's literally what happened to us. Literally, probably, I want to say 4 months after he left. It was already hard dealing with him leaving.
Yeah.
We had the remnants of our marriage that wasn't really going very well, and wasn't even sure we even wanted, to even be together. And he's now in a, war zone. And on my side, probably within about a 6 month period, my older half brother was killed in a car accident. And about 2 months after that, my grandfather died. It just like kept going for like the entirety of 2008. And I instantly relapsed. Yeah. And again, when you don't deal with the root issues, you will be triggered.
Yeah.
you will be triggered, and those triggers will come, and when they do, you end up falling back into your old patterns, and that's exactly what I did. I was right back to getting drunk. I was right back to getting high, trying to cope, with it as much as I could. Exactly. And it's always difficult when you're dealing with something that's, I feel like that when death is already traumatic anyway, right?
Yes.
But it's traumatic when something happens unexpectedly. I was supposed to, see my brother. It would happen on 4th of July.
Yes.
And we were supposed to be, see him just hours, before he was killed, or after, We were supposed to see him that day, and it didn't happen. And so that was really difficult. Just a lot of loss that year,
Yes.
For our family. And so trying to deal with it, I wasn't handling it again, not very well. And then having my marriage, dealing with that whole thing.
Yeah.
So, fast forward, I like to tell people that I got saved when I was 7 years old, but I got saved when I was probably about 22. And it was like 22, 23. And I had hit a moment where, I'm not even like sharing all of the horrible things that I did and how really self-destructive that I was. But I would have to say it was getting pretty close to time that he was going to be returning home. We were pretty much just like, well, we don't know if we even want this or not.
Right.
We were both exhausted. And I was very, very drunk one night, and I had already moved back to Texas in preparation, for him to return home because, getting a place to live again and all those things in place. And we weren't going to be living on base any longer after that. We were going to be living just there in the community of Killeen.
Okay.
And so, it was nice because I did have, friends there and other women that were there that were also, preparing for their husbands to return home. But I was very, very drunk one night, and I stumbled out to my, my front porch. It's like 3 a.m. I don't even remember what time it was, but all I remember saying was, if this is what it means to be a Christian, then I don't want it.
Mm-hmm.
And I basically told God, I said, if you are real, then you're going to have to show me who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I was done after that.
Yes.
And I knew that there was something more that I hadn't experienced yet. I knew that Jesus was going to have to be more than what I had been taught for me.
Yeah.
And I literally woke up the next morning, and it was like my entire past was like a dream. That's the only way that I can describe it. I woke up the next morning, and it was like 10 pounds had lifted off of me.
Yeah.
And I woke up, and it sounds strange to hear it that way, but it's like I woke up and it felt like that everything that I had been doing up until that moment of my life was like me watching a movie of somebody else.
Right.
And from that moment on, I never touched liquor again. I never got high again from that moment on.
Wow.
And that was like 2008, like the end.
Wow.
And I knew that I was experiencing this moment where you literally see Jesus as that knight in shining armor that comes in and rescues you, and you are so undeserving of it, so incredibly undeserving. And he just came through, and he totally just in a moment, in a few hours between, talking to him on my front porch at 3 o'clock in the morning, very drunk, to waking up the next morning and feeling like that something had changed and I couldn't put my finger on what it was. And that began that new place for me.
That is beautiful.
Yeah.
That's great. I think one thing I love about, it's unfortunate that we have to go through difficulties and that we put ourselves through difficulties. But I think one thing that I've heard you kind of say repetitively, and one thing that's come up almost in every interview that we've done so far, and just in real life relationships and in my own life is a process.
Yes.
And there are really happy things and really tragic things.
Yeah.
And some days you wake up and it's a good day.
Yeah.
Other days you wake up, you're sad, you're grieving, you feel alone. And that, whether you know Jesus or not, life is real. Yeah. And things happen regardless. And just the patience of God. And sometimes I feel like in church, big church, like capital C church.
Yeah.
We feel like I'm going to get saved, or however you would like to. I'm going to meet Jesus, and everything is going to magically work out, and my family's going to have an easy time getting along. I'm going to have plenty of finances.
Yeah.
I'm going to go, live my best life, dream big dreams, kill it on all fronts. And that is not, that is actually a false narrative.
It is.
All the time. I'm hoping that you're living in that spot if you're listening, but the odds are, if you've been alive long enough, that things come up. But just the process of, I made it through. I made it through. I moved back home. I had good people pouring into me. I was still struggling.
Absolutely.
Both and. There's a struggle, and there are successes and wins.
Yeah.
And then more struggles.
Yeah.
And then more wins. But
I love the way you describe that, too, because that's what it looks like.
It's just,
that's the process. Yeah. More struggle, more win. And then more growing, right, in Jesus as you move through it.
You learn. And I do think, I would say my salvation experience was similar to yours. I know that when I was 7, I loved Jesus as much as I possibly could. Yeah. I knew all the things.
Yeah.
I believed them. I wanted to go to heaven. I wanted to live right. And so that was, I have no doubt, had I died as an 8-year-old, I would have sat with Jesus.
Yeah.
But it was more, I'm going to say probably 22, 23, when I know I actually recognized the impact of the cross and grace, and that I needed it.
Yeah.
And it was almost, in my personal experience, I was teaching out of town, and we were married, but I had just gotten away.
Yeah.
I was not in a good place, and it was almost just like I had, in an instant, the Lord gave me a perspective of looking down at myself and me going, what in the world? Like this is not what I was thinking was going to be the case for me or anything else. And you just had a sense of knowing. Yeah. And that, I feel like once you understand that, there is nothing that feels better. Once you recognize your own personal need, there's nothing better than feeling that grace and just the joy that comes, and the incredible gratitude that comes with that. Yeah. And then the freedom. You still have stuff that's going to come ahead. Yeah. 100 battles after that, 100 stupid things I've done. I won't put that on you. Maybe you learned your lesson really good. You never went off the rails again. I, on the other hand, am a slow learner and did. But there is something about just that knowing that gives you, salvation and life and all the things. Yeah. Okay, so he comes home, and what happens?
We were probably up. Now, mind you, I knew that, and it's funny that you bring up how it's like, oh, you come through those good places, and then it's like, okay, more battles ahead. Oh, that's where my mind was. Bless my little heart. I was so happy. I was like, yes, I'm experiencing freedom. This is great, because literally, like, my life changed, like, after that. Yeah. And I knew something was different, and I was, my relationship in God just, like, totally changed. And then my husband came home, and I'm like, yes, we're going to do this. Everything's going to be great. We're going to get our marriage together. Yeah, no. It was not what I thought. It was not this blissful moment that I thought, right? And my husband comes home, and I knew that, like, the very first time that I hugged him after, they were able to get off of the plane and everything, I instantly knew that something was wrong. Instantly. And there was, you could look at him, and there was absolutely nothing in his eyes at all. It just, nothing was there. And I was like, well, I don't know what that is, but we'll get to that later. You don't really know what you're dealing with yet. But I do know that one of the things that we did do was that very night, we made the decision. We are putting everything out on the table. Everything about our past, everything that we've done. And if we're both still here in the morning, we're doing this.
We're doing it.
And we are not going to talk about going back after that. And that's what we did. And
Wow.
we were both there.
Yes, no one left. That was great.
No one left. We were both still there. And that's pretty much like, that was where things really changed in our, in our marriage. Now, it doesn't mean that there weren't these moments where it was like, oh, things are still terrible. I got to get out of here. Like, we had those moments still, but we knew that it was like, are we going to fight for this or not? You know what I mean? And we were both on board, to do it. But really that began a whole other type of battle. My husband, pretty much almost lost his sanity. He was diagnosed with severe PTSD. I didn't know what was happening.
Sure.
Mind you, we knew what PTSD was. We knew what to look for, blah, blah, blah. But it manifests itself in different people differently. So I wasn't really quite sure what was happening. It was really scary because, you're waking up in the middle of the night and he's like standing in a room in the dark and you don't know why he's there. And then you take him back to bed. And then the next day he has no idea what you're talking about. And that goes on for months. And then it started leading to him driving places. And he would come home from, I would send him to the grocery store, to, go get ketchup.
Right.
He would come home and he wouldn't know why he had a bottle of ketchup in his hand. And how he had gotten there and why he had it. Like, the disassociation was so bad.
Yes.
But he didn't know it was that bad. I didn't know that it was that bad until things really came to a head, where he ended up actually having an accident. And bless his heart, it was such a difficult time for him. And but God was in it. That's the crazy part, is that God was in it. And God literally, you talk about taking all control away from your life, right? And that's what he did with my husband. And that was when really things, I think, began to move, for him. His relationship with God began to change. And it was crazy because in the middle of all of that, it was like, we hadn't been able to have children.
Right.
This is all going on at the same time.
Yes,
so
of
you're
course
like,
it is.
yes, God is great,
Real life.
and you're just like, yes, this is faith. And no, it was just like, this is like really difficult. This is really hard. And mind you, we're over here like believing God for a kid, we knew that there were issues.
Right.
I was still dealing with pretty significant health issues, and doctors were like, you're not going to be able to have a kid, not without, help. And it was like, there was pretty much very low chance, very low chance of us having a kid. And it was like 4 years of this. And my husband's dealing with a mental breakdown at the same time.
Yes.
And, we're like, okay. And God had already told us, he'd already shown us that, we were going to have a daughter. And it was like, oh, okay. I'm telling you, when God says something to you, just be ready. Just be ready, because you're not going to it's not going to get handed to you,
Yes.
I just remember though, I had this thought of, my husband's having a mental breakdown. And you're going to give us a kid. How is this supposed to,
really?
How is this supposed to work?
This is not a good combination.
This is not a good time,
That's right.
And so wouldn't you know, that's how it went. And I came to a point, another huge crux right there with God, where I could not, I was so painful dealing with this with my husband that I was like, okay, fight or flight mode came back. And I was like, now mind you, I wasn't getting high, I wasn't getting drunk, I wasn't doing any of those things. I had come to a much healthier place in how to deal with things. But now I was just like, oh, I have to leave. I have to go, because if I stay here, this is crazy, And I was ready. I was like, okay, yes, I'm ready to leave. I cannot take this anymore. It's been one thing after the other. We weren't sure if he was going to be able to get better. He was very angry at the time as well. He had all of the symptoms of PTSD. He hid a lot of it from, his battle buddies, and they didn't know what was wrong with him. Everyone that knew him knew that something was very, very wrong.
Right.
And everybody was trying to figure out what to do. He started receiving, the care that he needed, with therapy and all the things they do for these people. And so, but he didn't want to be medicated. That was the hard part, because he was like, I can't.
There's such a stigma.
There is. And we'd seen people, deal with that. We'd had battle buddies that had already committed suicide. We had people that we knew that, had, driven into a wall at 100 miles an hour, because they were drunk, because they couldn't cope. We saw these things happening, people that we loved and we knew, and he didn't want to be medicated. And so God just did that. You know what I mean? It's really miraculous. His story is, I have to say, my husband's story is like, it's like much more exciting than mine.
Well, because if you watch him on this side, like on your television shows, that's totally not who he is.
Exactly.
So,
It's a miracle.
Yes.
It really is a miracle who he is now. But it's like God he did that. And when I wanted to leave, I remember, God just showing me, he was like, I had to stay.
Mm-hmm.
Everything in me wanted to leave. Like, I clearly loved him, but I just was like, I have to get out of here.
Yeah.
And I say that because when I made the decision that, I made the decision that I was going to stay and I was going to fight. And that's what I'm going to do.
Mm-hmm.
When, what was it? I think it was like 5 months later, we found out that, I was pregnant with our first daughter.
Yes.
And God's like, oh, look at that,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's right.
But again, it was that worry of, why is all of this happening? Like, I'm telling you, the way you described it, it's like you look down and you're like, yes, I have everything picked out for my life. Everything's going to be wonderful. And then God's like, yeah, no.
That's right. I don't even think it's God. I just think this is the actual facts.
Exactly.
You have been extremely misled by television and often the church.
You think everything's going to be
bad theology, something. I don't know.
But it's not like that.
Yeah. Well, then you're talking about your marriage, and one thing I know, probably a lot of people listening, I know we have single and married people, but I think one thing that I know from this age now, that I do not think we do a very good job of telling is that marriage is great and it is also extremely hard.
It is.
Same thing with parenting.
It is.
It's the best thing that can happen to you, and it is the hardest thing that can happen to you.
Yeah.
And not even that can happen, that you're going to have to participate in. But
Yeah.
I feel like at the outset of marriage, and maybe now, like currently in 2023, maybe people are more aware of that, and maybe as a community and as a church we do a little bit better of explaining the realities. But I'm like, it's going to get hard.
Yeah.
And you can just write that as a universal theme of life. There will be some point where it is hard and you want to run.
Yeah.
Or you want to leave.
Yeah.
And maybe for a minute, like maybe more than one time, probably more than one time. And I don't want to speak like I am happily married, and I'm extremely thankful for Clint and our marriage, but it's not always easy.
No.
And you're going to have to fight for it.
Yeah.
We talk about fighting with, and there are going to be moments when you're fighting with your spouse or your children or any number of people now, but you got to fight for, and that.
Well, a lot of time
is hard.
I think a lot of time people spend more time, like you said. There has been a stigma in my opinion, the body of Christ, that hey, it's God when everything looks great,
right?
And that's not true. And you hit the nail on the head when you said that. When you said like, no, I think that it's a place where have we equipped people to know how to deal with those places so they can have strong marriages and build strong families versus, well, nothing's going right, so it must be God. And it's like, no, that's not what that means.
Yeah, exactly.
I wish that I would have been stronger, but God used the situations to make me stronger for what I'm even
That's
doing
just
now.
How it works. I mean, we are weak, and in our weakness, His strength is made perfect. And I think too, if you've grown up, maybe in a faith community, you feel like you should be stronger, or it shouldn't. It shouldn't be hard for you to live righteously. It shouldn't be hard for you to stay married. It shouldn't be hard for you to parent. And that's just, again, no, like it is, anything good is hard.
Yeah.
So
I told someone,
but it's possible.
It is.
It's very possible.
It is, and a lot of people don't believe that it is, especially my generation.
Yeah.
They just, it's like, well, it got hard, so, or better yet, they hit any type of problem, and it means that, well, I'm not supposed to be with this person, and you're like, well, with that at that rate, or you have people that don't even want to get married anymore because they don't want to deal, with the work that goes into it. I tell people all the time, I know we all joke about it, but I'm like, marriage teaches you about, deliverance, and then you start having children, and then you start learning how to be holy. Because the whole experience is just like, oh, I thought I was a Christian until I got married, and then I threw a huge fit. Yeah. And then having children, the same thing.
Yes, it reveals all of your selfishness bits at a time. That's right. And then you're to my age, and you're like, oh, now we're getting back to the good. We're getting back to the good stuff, and now we're going to have a grandkid, and it's really going to be fun because we have zero pressure.
Yes,
all the fun with no pressure. No. So persevering is. I will say that I'm like, there are always exceptions, and if you're in a dangerous relationship, an abusive relationship where your life or your children are put in danger, that is not that is a thing where you better get out and take care of it.
Absolutely.
I'm not giving advice, but I'm just saying, if safety is an issue, that's a whole separate category, which we talked about.
Because God wants you to be whole, and He wants you to be protected.
Yes, and it is your obligation to protect yourself and your children. But if it is just a matter of, this is really hard and not what I thought it was going to be, don't quit. Don't give up. I do think you do have to take some action.
You do.
You might need to see, you probably do need to see a counselor. You probably need to get around some friends who are headed in the same direction with some of the same values, and find some community that can support you and that you can support. Because I think once you know, oh, everyone's going through this, it makes it a lot.
You don't feel alone.
It's a lot easier. Yeah. Okay, so pick it up. I digressed and got off and preached a sermon, and now it's back to you.
No, everything that you're saying, though, it really is what it looks like, though. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so, to make a long story short, God came in and just did the miraculous in my life. And to a degree that I knew that my experience with Him could absolutely not be taken away from me.
Right.
And I just want to encourage anyone that's listening that's, particularly in the ages maybe of, 17, 16, 18, 19 years old. One of the biggest changes in my life was realizing that I was going to have to experience God for myself, and not God that had been presented to me from my parents or from my pastor. Mind you, those are all important places because you are being introduced to Jesus, and you do need that. But there's a time when something changes, and He becomes real to you, and He becomes more than just what you hear about or what you read about, and it becomes real because all of a sudden your need for Christ, it just begins to happen in your life everywhere. My need for Christ whenever I am dealing with my child, my need for God when I'm dealing with my husband, my need for God when, I'm being falsely accused, my need for God in my finances. You begin to realize that He literally becomes everything in your life. And so my testimony to this day still makes me emotional because it's all Him. It's like all Him. My husband became well again without medication, completely back in his right mind. Wow. And God used a lot of different interesting ways to do that. One of those was a puppy that we had that just brought so much healing to his life. Just brought him in a totally different place. We had our daughter, and, my husband had said that, we knew our time in the military was over. We knew that our marriage wasn't going to survive. We knew that he wasn't going to survive any more of that. Mind you, he had a very difficult deployment, lots of injuries, very sick, and it's difficult being separated, from someone when I would hear from him probably about once every 3 to 4 months, and I wouldn't know when that was. Just knowing that he was in danger and knowing all those things that were going on, and I had no idea, no clue when, if he was, going to come back or not come back or all those different things. But he did, and a lot of people didn't, and he did. And so, ended up having 2 more children, which is, again, total miracle, mind you. I remember, a family member that, kind of knew our history, and they saw our kids one time and they said, wow, like, you guys weren't supposed to be able to have kids.
Mm-hmm.
And you're watching these, might I add, very rambunctious, strong-willed children.
Normal children.
Yeah, fireballs. And again, just the miraculous, just over and over and over again in my life. And God used every single one of those moments to help me to grow. He used every single one of those moments to demonstrate how amazing he is. And while, like you said, it's like there's the hard times, to not despise the hard times, because it teaches you. And mind you, I just want to settle the whole thing of God's not out here doing things to you to teach you some kind of lesson. That's not his heart for you at all.
That's not how it works.
That's not how it works at all, right? I feel like sometimes God receives credit for things that he shouldn't.
The bad things. That's right.
and to know that you do have a very real adversary, and to know that you are living in a very dynamic time where you may feel very unsafe, and you may feel like it's unsafe for your family or for your kids. And we live in very uncertain times. And so you're going to be living through a lot of unique, circumstances. But to know that, like, every opportunity, no matter if it's difficult, no matter if you're dealing with triumph and victory versus the dark night of the soul. It can be either of those things.
Yes.
And yet, Jesus is present in both of those times. And to know that he can definitely use those times of difficulty to not only demonstrate who he is, but to show you who you really are as well.
Yeah.
Because a lot of...
And sometimes I cannot take any more revelation of who I am.
Exactly.
But he will have his way.
I'm telling you. I mean, a lot of mine was just like throwing big temper tantrums. Like, a lot of mine was like, okay, well, your son's done throwing his temper tantrum. Would you like to go ahead and take your turn? I realized, like, wow, I really have a lot more problems than I thought that I did with every situation that came along. Or you think you're like, oh, God, I came through that. I got healed. And then you're like, no, I did not. No, I'm still a lunatic out here.
Hey, it happens. I can remember thinking that my teenage years were some of my easier years.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay. Like, you feel like you have some mastery over yourself. And then I recognized later in life, no, you had really good parents.
Yeah.
And you're a mess. Right. And now that we've let you live by yourself for a minute.
Yeah. Now you're realizing that you're a mess.
Figure out, just how great your parents were and what they kept you from.
Absolutely.
Thank God. Okay, so you guys are currently you got a lot of stuff going on, Janelle.
We do. And sometimes I'm like, what are we doing again?
Well, you've got a lot of followers, and I know you definitely have a group of followers. But explain to people who may not know, like what you're doing now.
Okay, so moved back to Oklahoma about 5 or 6 years ago, and lived in Texas for 12 years. Big shout out to Texas. It really is home. It really, outside of home,
yes.
Like, just an amazing state. Just had some of the best memories there. And we lived all over Texas, actually, and then was able to return home. I have to say, it's been really, really awesome to be near my family again.
Good.
That was after a long time. And, having grandkids and,
yes.
My mother was, bless her little heart, she was like, this isn't working anymore.
It's time for you to get closer.
She's like, the flights aren't working anymore.
No.
Like, it's time for you to, be like, now we're like 20 minutes from her. And she
Perfect.
just, like, couldn't be happier. And so that's been huge for my kids to be able to have that time with their family. And I have just one of the most amazing supportive families I think anybody could ever ask for. And I am not saying that to my family that's listening. I am not saying that to be polite because I'm on Marcy's podcast. I absolutely think that you guys are amazing. And I do not know what I would do without any of them. It's amazing to have siblings that call and see how you're doing and pray for you.
Yes.
And, my mom, that is just like my biggest cheerleader.
Yes.
It's amazing to have, all of that. And so, anyways, but now we're in Oklahoma City, and we are the founders, my husband and I were the founders and producers of Red River TV. And that is essentially like a conservative platform where we produce media, not just our own, but we also are producing other platforms for other people that also have conservative voices as well. We work on documentaries and do different things like that. I also have a personal blog called The Story of Nell.
Yes.
And that's really kind of a place of just being able to kind of do the fun part.
Yeah.
That's not the politics. So to really be able to be creative, and it's just, I think, bringing, helping to create a really unique experience for the reader or for the viewer to experience Jesus. And if we can help someone do that in any way, shape, or form, like, that's our goal. And we do videos for that as well, where it's just taking sound and imagery and words, and it's putting those things together to create a really unique experience for, like I said, for the viewer. We're going to be doing, scriptural, videos where, again, it's putting all those things together with the Word of God to really create a unique experience for people. I think in the times that we live in now, I think that producing an atmosphere that is just full of hope and that is just full of peace and full of joy is so important, because people are desperately looking for that. Yeah. They're looking for a sound of hope. They're looking for a sound of just something that is calming to their, to their spirit. And so that's the fun part, right? The Red River TV part is a little bit more combative. It's a little bit more controversial, but it's funny to have those two platforms at once, because you're like, one's like, this is great. This is like really like calming. And it's like we get to really be creative and fun. Yeah. And the other one, you're just like, okay, it's totally different. Totally different. I have to admit, there's been moments where I've had it out sometimes with God about that other platform, about Red River TV, because sometimes it's those moments where it's like, it's who God's called you to be, because you're just like, I don't want to do this. You know what I mean?
Well, I was going to ask you, because the story of Nell.com, is that right?
Yes.
Is that the thing? Is a beautiful space. It is everything that you're saying that it's meant to be. It 100% is. It's beautiful. It is very soothing and peaceful and encouraging, but not in a hype kind of way. It's just
the basics, right?
Yes. Yeah. I loved it. And your blog posts were very encouraging and short. So if you're needing some respite, or respite, however you say it, from the craziness of the world, that is a good place. But the Red River TV and the conservative platform, how were you guys always into politics, or how did this come about?
No, we were not. And it's funny because there's like this joke, it's like an inside joke, with my husband, that it's like, I forced my husband into politics, or like I forced him into something. And I'm like, no, actually, like it was his idea, actually, more than anything else. But it started really when we were in Texas. And again, those moments where you're like, God's asking me to do what? I am in no position to do any of that, right? And that's usually how it goes. It's usually how it goes. You don't feel like you're qualified. You don't feel like that you're in a good place in your life to do it. And God's like, sure, let's go. And that's pretty much how it happened. It was, I don't know, I think it was like around 2014, maybe 2013. I had just had our son, so I've got a newborn in one hand, I've got a toddler, on the other hand. There's literally a year between all three of my kids. So fun times there. But it was one of those situations where you start to become more aware of the world, and you become more aware of what's happening, around you. And I think that's kind of where it was for my husband and I. We were not political people. You know what I mean? Like, my parents were always, conservative voters and stuff growing up. But my parents never talked to us about politics. They never told us how we should vote. They always said that this is a journey that you need to go on yourself, and you need to know why you believe what you believe, so that you will come to the right conclusion on your own, and then be grounded in that conclusion. Which is, I'm glad they did that, because it helped my siblings and I to be able to know why we believe what we believe now. We are doing the exact same thing with our own children, but it was one of those things where I I wasn't into politics, nothing like that, but it was really a place of me seeing what was happening in the world and going, something's very wrong, you know, in our country. And I remember having these thoughts every single week. You're watching the news, you're watching what's going on, and I was like, you know, somebody needs to do something, you know, about this. And literally audibly, I heard one day, why don't you do something? And I was like, yeah, okay. You know what I mean? Like, literally. You know, it was like literally I'm standing there with like 2 babies and I'm like, what am I going to do? This, okay. You know what I mean? Like I didn't even take it seriously at first. And then God just began to unfold it, you know, and we started with journalism in 2015. And that's how long we've been, you know, going is really when it started, and started with that. And we were always connected to Oklahoma and always connected to what was going on here. And that's pretty much where it started. And then we started doing videos, Red River TV, pretty much about 2 years later. And we've just been moving forward pretty much ever since. It's not easy. I will say that.
I cannot. I can imagine that it is not, because it gives me great anxiety.
Right.
Politics in general just makes me,
And between those two worlds, like media and government, you're like, yay.
Like have all the crazy in one
like you put us in 2 of the wildest fields that there are, and I was like, I could have done without that, you know, it would have been nice. But at the same time, my family gives me they like joke about it now, but you know, my sister said to me one day, she said, you know, you had a really big mouth when you were a kid, and it's starting to make a lot of sense, you know.
Now we see the point. Yes.
So it was kind of one of those things where it was like, okay, it makes sense now. But understanding, you start to see though that who you are, you can't even like you don't even have control over it, because you know it's him.
Yes.
Because you're like, oh, I have nothing to do with this at all. And I kind of get the whole thing a lot where you get up and you say things that a lot of people won't get up and say, and you know, this or that. But it's getting people to understand that I was a child that was absolutely just like, I had debilitating anxiety growing up my entire life.
Okay.
And so I always saw myself as a very cowardly kid, right? I mean, really? I had terrible anxiety when I was a kid, as far back as I can remember, and dealt with that all the way up until adulthood. And so it was one of those places where I knew that it wasn't me when I could stand in front of a camera or a crowd of people and I feel no anxiety at all when I do that. And so I'm like, yeah, that's definitely God, because it gets me in a lot of trouble, you know, and it's like, well, I didn't ask, you know, for that part, but it's still that place of gosh, your salvation's constantly being worked out, right? Because I still had those moments of, man, God, I don't want this. And having to submit to the identity that God's given you, because there were plenty of moments where I was like, I could just be a mom and just be home and just, you know, and having all of the rejection and all of the words that come at you and all of the stuff that comes at you and the friendships that you lose and all the stuff. Yeah. I mean, I won't even get into all of that, but it's very, it's a lot.
No, I think
it's a lot of sacrifice.
And you're definitely gifted in all of those areas, but you have my utmost respect, because I am a conservative. I probably am not super far to one side.
I don't think anybody is anymore, are they?
I know, yeah. I'm too embarrassed to claim a side at this point. I'm not on a side. I have a biblical worldview that I try very hard to live out and police my own behavior. I don't
exactly.
But I do really respect the fact that you are gutsy enough to do it. And I think, and you know, I ask you this, or I ask you if I could ask you this, because I'm like, you're a young black female.
Yeah.
In an environment where I don't think that the conservative view is popular.
Yeah.
Do you feel that, like, amongst your friends and your peers, or do you not feel that way?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's we joke about it because it's funny now. It wasn't funny, you know, before. It's funny now because we're used to it. Yeah. But like, I mean, a lot of places you go, you're basically like a unicorn. You know what I mean? Like people are looking
yeah.
at you like, I'm sorry, what? You know what I
Right.
mean? And they don't really know like what you're talking about. People assume a lot of things about you.
Yes.
And so it's been very interesting, especially being Black, being a woman too at the same time, and also being a Christian. It's like
a triple threat.
It's like a triple threat.
Yes.
And so you're just like, you come up against a lot of opposition, but at the same time, it's kind of interesting because it kind of what seems to be working against you actually works for you.
Probably so.
At the same time, because people begin to realize that you actually believe what you say.
Right.
And that, you know, a big part of our platform is definitely about getting people to understand that it is people versus government.
Right.
And that it's not about parties against each other per se. I think everyone's realizing that one.
Yeah. Well, let's hope. Listen, we're fixing to find out. Next year we start this craziness again.
Right. I'm like, as everyone said, they're like, can we just like, you know, vote for like ALF or something?
Yes.
Like, let's just like, you know, have like a stand-in for a little while and take a break.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was very difficult in the beginning. Because a lot of, mind you, it's much more popular now to be Black, to be conservative, and to be Christian. It's super popular now, mind you. We started this when it was like, you know what I mean? It was like a handful of people. And so dealt with a lot more opposition then. But now it's more of a thing of probably people just wanting to take your experiences in life because of your title and then think that they know who you are as a result of that. They think that you, people think that you've never experienced racism because, oh, well, you don't talk about it all the time. And I'm like, well, why would I talk about it all the time when, you know, I know Jesus Christ who has literally come down, you know what I mean? Like literally has power over all of my enemies. And why would I continue to focus on all of the things that he's given me authority over? Do you know what I mean?
Yes,
like it's just basic things like that. So you don't give them the answers that they particularly like because you're not creating an atmosphere of weakness, but an atmosphere where it points to Jesus and how and his strength. So I guess
it is so hard because we have gotten so polarized and made so many assumptions about one another.
Absolutely.
I mean, race, gender, political viewpoints, denominations within the church, different regions of the country. We've become
compartmentalized.
Yeah, and it's so easy to, now that we think we know everything about everyone, thank you, social media. And a lot of people post so that you do know what they think about everything. But just to take a step back and see, we're all human.
Yeah.
Everyone, 99% of the people alive and in the United States, probably in the globe, want safety for their family.
Yeah.
They want health care.
Yeah.
They want education.
Yeah.
They want religious freedom.
Yeah.
They want a safe place to pursue their dreams and you know, work and have a business, and that we have the same.
They really
goals.
Do want the same thing,
we want
but it doesn't look that way.
But it does not look that way. And I think if you dehumanize and just start putting labels on chunks of the population, you lose.
Well, you lose unity. That's for sure,
which
they're terrified
the nuance.
of. Yeah.
I'm like, and you also sort of disregard people's lives.
You do.
And their history.
You
and their family's history and how we all get to where we are. And
people's stories don't become important anymore.
Yes.
Which is why I love what we get to do, because we're storytellers at heart.
Yes, you are.
And I love what you said about that, because it's like, no one knows anyone's story anymore.
You don't. And most of us, even our friends, may not know our deepest longings or fears or concerns or loves, desires, any of that. And I feel like if we can connect back on some of those levels and back up off of some of the things that divide us, not that we need to deal with the hard things.
Yeah.
God has always dealt with the hard things. He is for freedom, equality, love, honoring one another above ourselves.
Yeah.
And all of that. But just to, I don't know, take a deep breath and look at each other as humans who are very similar to each other in what we think, and figuring out a better path to get there. I don't know. What are your I mean, we literally are gearing up for another election season.
Oh yeah, it's terrifying.
I know. I dread it, but then I think, okay, maybe we as humans, and especially as a Christian and a part of the church with the capital C, I hope we do better.
Mm-hmm.
Hope we do a lot better.
Mm-hmm.
And this is another opportunity to prove that we've learned something.
Yeah.
What do you have expectations? What are your thoughts, or do you guys do anything in particular to prepare for another election cycle?
You know, I think the biggest thing is, it's funny because I see this pattern with us every single election cycle, but also just each year, is our biggest message, I think, to people is that regardless of what is going on in the White House and what is going on even here in your own state, in the State House, is to understand that God is still present. And I think that unfortunately, a lot of people have they've chosen politics over the promises of God, and they've kind of determined the promises by the politics. Yeah. And you're like, God still has promises for your life that have nothing to do with who's in charge. And we're getting people to be encouraged in that way, because a lot of people are losing hope. I mean, we get messages every day. Yeah. People are like, oh, our country's done. This is done. And it's like, well, that means that God's not powerful. That means that God's, like, why is he here then? Like, why did he die on the cross? Like, why is he equipping us? Like, why is he doing any of this if everything's just done? Yeah. But it's also getting people to understand that it's like, okay, but, the word of God's very clear in the times that we live in. It's a guide, for us to know how to continue to move forward. So I don't think that it's a place where, people have to get caught up in the doom and the gloom of the politics, and to understand that it's like, God is not bound by anything that's happening in Washington. He's not bound by anything that's happening in in your state. Yeah. He's not bound by the authority here on earth. He's very much in control, and you should absolutely be pursuing who he's called you to be, and to not hide that, and to not think that you have to go and build a bunker and all these things because it's all terrible. It's about getting excited because he's still king. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, he's still God, and he has amazing things for you. It's not all going to be sunshine and rainbows. It doesn't mean that the times that we're living in are going to get like better. It will still be difficult. We're clearly in a struggle in this nation. Yeah. We're in a struggle, but it's in that place where it's like, God, you're still God. And we believe that. But we are trying to encourage voters that it's like, I think people have to understand what they are attaching themselves to, and know that you don't have to have one view or the other to want freedom. Right. You don't have to be a part of a political affiliation to want to see help for people. You don't have to be a part of these things. I think it's getting people out of the two-party system sometimes. Now, mind you, we do want to support conservative people that, if God instructs you to vote for that person, sure, you do that. But I think it's just knowing that people have to get out of the R and the D. Yes. They have to get away from that and realize that there's a lot of R's that aren't ours. There's a lot of R's out there that are not ours, and getting people to understand that I believe that it's a nameless, faceless generation that I think that God wants to use to even change politics, and that people are done with the politician. They're done with a lot of that, and they want fighters. They want people that are going to help protect what we already have. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited to see the future. I have high hopes for Gen Z. People do not let me down. There's a revival right now in Asbury, Kentucky, that is extremely exciting.
It's exciting.
Yes, and getting to know the Lord and who he is and who you are in him, and then living your life well. Yeah. In that is going to bring change. Yeah. And good things. Well, Janelle, I think I've worn you out on all the topics. Thank you so much for sharing and coming on. If you have, last question, if you have any advice for young Black females, I'm going to get really specific. Really, any females or males, we will let them take something from your advice too. But I just think, as young women coming up, do you have any advice or encouragement specifically for them?
Oh, I would have to say there is absolutely nothing on this earth that can stop what God already started. That He is the finisher. He's the author, but He's the finisher. And that means that there is nothing out of hell and there's nothing on earth that can even begin to try to reshape or reform who you are and reshape and reform your future. And that's what my parents taught me. And it completely changed my life. And I wasn't taught that because of the color of my skin that I was going to be treated a certain way. I was literally told one thing: you have Jesus, you can do whatever it is that you want to do, as long as it glorifies Him and it's going in the direction that He has for your life, because He's already given you the resources to do it.
That's right.
And so that's my biggest encouragement, I would have to say, if I could narrow it down. So,
I love it.
Yeah.
No, that's true.
Yeah.
That is true.
Yeah.
Amen. I'm waving my white hanky. All the things.
Thank you so much for having me on. This is fun.
Well, thank you, and good luck. And we'll be watching, so we can find you on. Quickly, just name where people can find you.
Yes. The story of Nell 1986. That's the number. .com. That's where the blog is for the Story of Nell. You'll be able to find those videos on YouTube under Story of Nell. Also, Red River TV. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. We are on Rumble. And also, we'll be having a website that we'll have coming out pretty soon. We're going to be doing some fun things there. So, yeah, that's where you can find us.
Find her there and enjoy all of their good work. Thanks again.
Thanks, Marcy.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you like what you heard, please like, follow, and hit subscribe to keep up with all future episodes. We'd also love for you to leave us a 5-star review. That wraps it up for today's Marcy in the Middle. And remember, whatever you're in the middle of, you're not alone. We'll see you next time.